Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good afternoon from Paris. On this special day, which is the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, I am pleased to welcome all of you today to the online expert meeting dedicated to combating illicit trafficking of cultural property in time of COVID-19. As you know, the ongoing COVID pandemic has brought about an unprecedented lockdown of the entire cultural sector worldwide, which has exposed museums and archaeological sites to theft. Here in Paris, we were alerted by the attempt to steal stones from the Notre Dame Cathedral with its restoration uh, and was interrupted in lockdown. We have also been notified about the theft of Van Gogh painting in the Netherlands. This current global health crisis has also highlighted UNESCO's role in protecting and safeguarding cultural heritage and ensuring its preservation and accessibility for the public. Within the framework of the organization mandate, the 70 Convention is the only legal instrument in force to protect cultural objects as bearers of identity and history for humanity in times of peace. In this effort, UNESCO can count on crucial support from the growing number of state parties and from the European Union, with which we are maintaining a very fruitful and much appreciated cooperation. This year, 2020, we also celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing the illicit import, export, and transfer of ownership of cultural property. The online meeting on the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural property in time of COVID-19, which UNESCO held on 14 May, with its key partner in Interpol, VCO and ICOM, confirmed that the global sanitary and economic crisis involving lockdown actions shifted priorities away from cultural property protection and lead to an increase in related crime. Illegal archaeological excavation have increased considerably, mainly due to limited surveillance and confinement of professionals. And there has been a proliferation of online sales of cultural objects online. In this context, UNESCO has organized this online expert meeting to discuss the increasing threat of looting and illicit trafficking of cultural property and explore possible urgent measures to be undertaken to support countries' efforts in protecting their cultural property during this COVID-19 pandemic. During the recent period, many reports have focused on the increased illicit trafficking of looted antiquities on social networks. This Tuesday, 23rd of June, this week, Facebook has published their new policy that bans trading of all historical artifacts on Facebook and Instagram. At UNESCO, we welcome this ban, which we strongly recommended during our discussion with Facebook in the development phase of this new policy. But the biggest credit is to be given to ATAR project, whose incredible investigative work contributed to this historic development. This is the first ban of this kind with worldwide application. I will come back to this major development later. Dear online participants from all around the world, I warmly welcome you again to today's debate, which has two panels with 5 experts participating in each. I am pleased that we have been able to gather so many experts around today's subject. The first panel is dedicated to illegal excavation and the second one to online trade. Each expert will be asked a couple of questions and they will have between 3 and 5 minutes to reply. The public can also can ask questions on the YouTube chat. We are going to select a few of them for the experts depending on the time we have left. So, dear audience, from now until 15:30, we will discuss about illegal excavation. I welcome the following experts. Amr Al-Azm, co-director of Antiquities, Trafficking and Heritage Anthropology Research, ATA project. He is a professor of Middle East history and anthropology at Shawnee State University in Ohio. He's a founder and board member on the Day After Project, TDR, and currently coordinates the Heritage Protection Initiative for Cultural Heritage Protection at the TDR. He's also co-director of Antiquities Trafficking and Heritage Anthropology Research Project and co-founder of ACO. We have also Eva Martinez, Assistant Director for Heritage, Honduran Institute of Anthropology and History in Honduras. She is an archaeologist, university professor, and civil servant. She has been working in the field of cultural heritage since 2007 as Chief of Cultural Heritage at the Honduran Institute of Anthropology and History, as private consultant and also lecturer. Such an experience has broadened her academic understanding of archaeology and anthropology in terms of what cultural heritage means in the present form, the perspective of multiple stakeholders. We have with us also today Vincent Michael, researcher, professor, University of Poitiers, donc c'est Vincent Michel, of France. He's a professor at the University of Poitiers, archaeologist and orientalist, specialist in the Middle East and the fight against the illicit traffic in cultural goods. He divides his time between teaching, research, and fieldwork in the MENA region and collaborates with investigation service, police and custom, national and international heritage institutions for heritage protection. We have also Maria Polner, Senior Policy Advisor, World Customs Organization. She's a Senior Policy Advisor and the lead of the Cultural Heritage Program at the Enforcement and Compliance Subdirectorate of the World Customs Organization. She has 7 years of experience in enforcement matters and more than 12 years experience in custom and cross-border trade issues. Maria received 2 degrees from the Central European University in Budapest and from the Collège d'Europe in Bruges. She speaks fluent French, English, and Russian, Ukrainian, as well as some Spanish and Turkish. But today we're gonna we're gonna try to speak English. She's an author of multiple publications on illicit trade and general customs matters. And finally, we have Marina Schneider, Senior Legal Officer and Treaty Depository, International Institute for Unification of Private Law, UNIDO, Senior Legal Officer at UNIDO, where she's responsible for the instruments and tools developed on the international protection of cultural objects. Well, we're gonna start, but it's important that you understand that on April 22, during the meeting of Ministers of Culture that was organized by UNESCO, many ministers of culture from all around the world, we had more than 130, voiced their concern over the safeguarding of their archaeological sites and museums during lockdown. The focus on sanitary measures and restriction of movement has adversely affected the surveillance of cultural sites and museums, which has, since the beginning of this year, provided opportunities for more illegal excavation of archaeological sites. So we're gonna start, if you allow me, we're gonna start with Monsieur Al-Azm. Dear Amr, the ATAR project was published, a recent study on illicit excavation during the pandemic. What does your study conclude? Has there been an increase in illegal excavation during this pandemic? That's the question for you.
Yes, there has been. And by the way, for some reason, my video will not start because the host has stopped it. Okay, there we are. Now we've been given permission to start. Hello, everyone. Yes, in answer to the question that you just asked, we have obviously seen an uptick, particularly during the last few months because of the COVID pandemic. And there are a number of reasons you can attribute it to, but mainly because in times of stress, in times of disruption, when people cannot have access, when their livelihoods are disrupted because of conflict, because of a situation like the COVID, people will turn to other means to find a way to make a living. If you think of areas, countries like Syria right now, like maybe even Lebanon, that are under extreme stress, economic stress, because not just of the conflict, but they're collapsing economies as well. People will always turn to try and find alternative ways to help them basically survive. And so what we are seeing is mainly an increase in what I would refer to as subsistence looting. This is looting where they're going out, they're trying to find some way to supplement their incomes because their livelihoods have been stopped, disrupted, destroyed, etc. Also, in other possible contributors might be the fact that local authorities, the police, the governments are also very busy, distracted with other issues relating to in this case, trying to maintain lockdowns, take control of the ongoing pandemic, and that again gives some cover to both subsistence looters and criminal elements that tend to thrive in these chaotic times. Hello? Hello?
Do you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry, I lost you for a minute. Your voice went.
Okay, we're gonna go to Eva Martinez. Dear Eva, during the pandemic, due to the confinement measure, it was more difficult to protect archaeological sites in many places. Have you observed an increase in illegal excavation, especially in Central America or in Latin America?
Hi. Well, I'm just going to provide a little bit of context. It is uncertain when the lockdown restrictions will be lifted in Honduras. We are still under strict circulation restrictions. So monitoring the state of archaeological sites under these circumstances has been a challenge. So besides the archaeological sites under direct management of the state, being able to mobilize staff to remote areas or even areas beyond the immediate supervision of our regional offices has been very difficult or simply impossible. In the last 20 years, we can see an increase in the destruction of archaeological sites in the country due to different factors, such as population growth and the subsequent infrastructural development. Also due to agriculture activity, development projects linked to the rise of the tourism industry, among others, which on occasions go hand in hand with accidental, but also with intentional looting. Most of the times we are able to identify illicit excavations at archaeological sites in the context of these broad development activities due to legal and protocol issues related to construction permits and imposed supervisions. However, being able to identify intentional illicit excavations relies on three main factors: systematic monitoring, which is not the most reliable source, and I'm sorry. I thought I had my video on all the time. Okay, so systematic monitoring, which is what the Honduran Institute of Anthropology and History does, which is the most reliable source of information. Looting or robbery complaints, reports done by citizens, which is not very common for archaeological sites, and the seizures of archaeological objects, which most of the time doesn't provide evidence of origin. So in terms of official records and statistics, the illicit excavation or archaeological sites in Honduras are underrepresented and therefore hard to quantify with accuracy. Having said this, during the pandemic, as far as the pandemic goes, we have not received complaints or reports of illicit excavations at archaeological sites in the country, official reports. Of course, this doesn't mean that it's not happening. We are experiencing a health crisis, but also an economic crisis, which most likely is going to translate into an increase of looting, which is probably happening right now, not only in Honduras, but in Latin America. So only when we activate our monitoring activities in the field and collect information from our partners, from local communities, we will be able to understand the magnitude of the situation.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva. Dear Vincent, you have been working extensively in conflict areas such as in Libya. You are well known as a customs and police expert in identifying stolen objects. Recently, in a documentary shown on French television, you were seen tracing the trail of traffickers from ancient cities to small clandestine dealers. What are the main changes you have noticed during the pandemic for this illicit excavation?
Yes, so thank you very much to UNESCO for being behind this meeting, and Lazare, of course. Indeed, there is more and more information on illegal traffic in cultural property. There are more and more studies being carried out by researchers, by different organizations, different programs like Nature, like ATAR, and it's very good things to be able to speak and identify this scourge, because all countries are affected. We need precise data to document illegal practice, to list threatened objects, to conduct a documentary watch on internet and social network. With UNESCO, and thanks you, Real, we must make this fight against illegal traffic in cultural property a priority. First, the destruction of heritage, the looting of sites, the illicit traffic in cultural property are one problem. These attacks on heritage are often the result of time of crisis, political, economical, earth crisis, and the preferred target of the small delinquency, but also the criminal groups. Why? It's okay, because it's the first of all a very lucrative trade which feed a very important underground economy toward European and American market, but which also tends to evolve according to area of conflict, the moving of wealth, and also of the application of law in the fight against the trafficking of cultural property. And this to another place, and now affect Eastern Europe, Asia, and Gulf countries. We cannot unaware this traffic and relegate it to the background. The art market and people can no longer ignore the extent of illegal trafficking in cultural property. If we take the situation before the COVID, for heritage in conflict zone, my specialty, we already had target destruction, religious destruction, vandalism, urbanization destroying heritage, clandestine excavation. Now with the COVID, the situation is different, depending on countries, of course, but there are general trends. that are found everywhere in the south and transit countries, from Lebanon to Tunisia, through Syria, Bosnia, Turkey, Palestine, and Libya. To the economic and political crisis is added the health crisis in a climate of insecurity, poor living condition, making life difficult for people, provokes the search of easy money, and therefore the looting and the sale of antique without much difficulty, because the objects are easy to access and the police and custom are busy with another priority, which leaves the way open to traffickers. What I observe is that COVID has expanded the possibilities of looting, theft, and illicit trafficking, because, the increase in traffic is not only linked to the COVID, but it was a factor that made the situation worse. The main difficulty does not come from objects stolen from museum and collection, because these objects are mentioned in inventory, which allow the traceability of work. And all the countries that I consult, it doesn't seem that there was a problem for museums, which were closed and very well secure. The problem comes mainly from looting, that is to say, from unknown object from clandestine excavation, which will be transformed into market value, difficult to trace. During the confinement period, the situation was worse, with a flagrant increase in looting in all countries consult. North Lebanon, Cyrenaica in Libya, Palestine, Tunisia. Without enough control and observation, there have been clandestine excavation at archaeological sites, often isolate, difficult access, in a remote and uninhabited area, necropolis, by example. Some people are looking for treasure, using map, study on internet, more and more with intelligence. Others use more and more metal detector. There are more and more metallic objects offered for sale. It's definitely a plague, really a plague, affect all countries. If for a long time, people were not aware, it's the Bank of country, but did not aware of its heritage, nor therefore of financial value, there is a clear change with an industrialization of antiques.
Sorry, I have to put it back. So we are going to Maria. From the point of view of a custom organization, what was the impact of COVID-19 for law enforcement, and how have you been handling it at your organization?
Thank you very much for the question, Ernesto, and good afternoon, everybody. Indeed, the COVID-19 has totally put us in a situation where we had to grab the new reality. The new reality meaning when the borders started shutting down in different locations around the globe, starting with the maritime borders and the air flows and finishing with the land borders, you can imagine that it really had a huge impact on our daily operations around the globe, on the operations of our member administrations. So we had to come up with a new idea how to manage the situation, because of course the critical flows of goods still have to be going on, despite the fact that the travelers could not really fly or travel in the way how they used to travel. Of course, on the one hand, that means that the passenger flows started reducing and eventually they stopped. And we saw it with the closure of major airports. However, when it comes to cargo, all the cargo operations have been ongoing, in particular because we were working under the emergency scenario, which means that there are certain measures that need to be taken into account when customs administrations have to move into the emergency scenario, such as disaster relief or as the pandemic. So that is why we needed to apply specific protocols in order to ensure that the flows of goods would be going despite different types of problems that we have been observing in the supply chains. So that meant for many customs administrations that they had to totally change their modus operandi and to focus on what's the most important. And of course, the most important thing for the customs administrations was to ensure the immediate flow and access to medicines and personal protection equipment. Of course, on the enforcement side, when this type of flows goes up, also another type of flow, such as counterfeit personal protection equipment and counterfeit medicine also goes up. And that was really a huge challenge for us, and we had to tackle it immediately. So the WTO released a number of guidances to members, together with the World Trade Organization, with other international organizations, on how to tackle this issue more appropriately. Now, when it comes to cultural heritage, here, of course, as it was already mentioned in the introduction, we had to prioritize. And obviously, the whole world was very much focused on how to deal with the emergency, how to deal with the crisis. So the cultural goods were not really on the priority list. It doesn't mean that customs administrations were not tracking or were not monitoring this type of trade, but that means that all the resources, all the human resources that were out there at borders had to be redirected in the most optimal way in order to deal with the situation and ensure that the population gets the critical supplies that they need. In some countries, it's the critical food supplies. In other countries, it is medicines, personal protection equipment, etc., etc. You may have seen also the rise of embargoes in many countries on different types of equipment. And that, of course, has a huge and direct impact on the population and also on the market. What we have noticed, indeed, is also the growth of illicit trade on the internet. So you could see a lot of objects that were in supply online, in particular, a lot of counterfeit objects, and that became a huge challenge for law enforcement. But please do not forget that even if the transaction happens online, even if the trade happens online, at some point in time, these objects, no matter be it personal protection equipment or cultural objects, they will cross the borders. And because they have to physically cross the border, somebody has to put it in a parcel, send it to another country, and somebody in this other country has to receive it. And usually customs is the only agency that is there at borders that monitors all types of flows, be it that they are generated somewhere in the physical domain or, so to say, in the virtual world. And I think this is something very important. So one of the lessons learned for us in order to move forward is that we are seeing this digitalization of the world, and that has really expanded a lot with the pandemic. We see different modi operandi even for us, for the international organizations, in the way we work, in the way we communicate with each other. That also implies that we need to totally rethink the way how we work together with our partners, with other law enforcement agencies, with the archaeologists, so depending on the area of crime that we deal with.
Yes, we agree 100% on what you said. So it's a new world that we have to embrace and to try to make it more sure, or ensuring that everything that we are talking can have a new rethink. And that's something very important. Dear Marina, in June 95, 25 years ago, the UNIDO Convention on stolen or illegally exported cultural objects was adopted in Rome. Why is it relevant in combating illegal excavation, particularly in this time of COVID-19? You have the floor.
Thank you, Ernesto. Good afternoon to everybody. What we've heard until now is the increase in excavations. That means that objects, as Maria said, will travel. Why are they stolen? Because they will at some point end on the market. So restitution will be very important. We always tell states that they must cooperate. It's like the same between organizations. We do cooperate, and how? Making sure that our instruments are complementary. This is the case between the 1970 Convention and the 1995 Convention. And we build on strength of the 1970 Convention, but we also remedy weaknesses. And illicit excavation is a weakness in terms of restitution of the 1970 Convention, because for an object to be returned, it should be stolen in a museum or a similar institution and be on the inventory of such institution. Of course, we're talking of objects we don't even know the existence of, they cannot be inventoried. This is why, of course, the UNESCO Convention has Article 9 bilateral agreements in case of emergency. Of course, COVID is an emergency, but we've seen other emergencies, conflicts everywhere. So the situation tends to become, may I say normal? I would not, but to be seen in a long time. So the UNIDO Convention has tried to go not in taking as an emergency measure, but to have mechanisms. How this is done? First of all, in terms of theft, objects which are illegally excavated or legally excavated but unlawfully retained are considered under the UNIDO Convention as stolen. What does this mean? It has two very important consequences. First consequence, the possessor of a stolen object shall return it. Doesn't matter where it was stolen. If and as an excavated object, illegally excavated, is considered as stolen, automatic restitution. Second important consequence, on-time limitation of actions. States will enter into a litigation, mediation, a procedure to have them back. Under the UNIDO Convention, there is no time limit for such an action, which is extremely important. Secondly, the UNIDO Convention, most of the objects are illegally excavated are, because of the national legislation, state property. But they also are banned from export. And the convention will permit, via the mechanism put in place, the return of such objects because of the violation of that legislation, and also because the fact that the object left the country impaired, for example, the physical preservation of the object or its context, the integrity of the object. We lost the scientific knowledge because of this illegal excavation. So this will permit to enforce legislation, export bans of a country in other countries, which is not always the case. So depending on the proof which can be brought, a state can, for illegally excavated object, either start a procedure under theft or illegal export. And if proof might not be very easy for illegally excavated objects to be brought, it must be easier for illegal export. For example, because there's no application for an export certificate which has been recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Marina. Now that we have discussed the increase of illegal excavation during COVID-19, we can turn to measures that should be taken to limit those crimes. So I will go forward with Amr. What can be done to better protect archaeological sites from illegal excavation? And that's very direct. What can we do?
And I think the answer is also quite straightforward. I'm going to quote a military general here from the Second World War who, when asked, how do you take a bridge? And he answered, from both ends. And I think this is how we should approach this issue, that there's a supply end and a demand end. And if we're going to protect archaeological sites, cultural heritage monuments, we need to tackle it from both the supply end and the demand end. With the supply end, it's really going to, in my opinion, it should be centered around local communities and the involvement of local communities, the involvement of local stakeholders, encouraging them, empowering them to work with either, and then depending on the situation, where you have obviously an active or functioning government, then they should be working with their local governments. But in many cases, and where we have the worst looting, it's usually in conflict areas where there is no functioning government, there's no functioning authority. So it really is down to these people. It's down to local archaeologists, local activists, local community leaders who take matters into their own hands and try to do that. And we've seen excellent examples of this in places like Idlib, for example, and the Mara Museum, where the people of Mara, once back in 2012, when the regime pulled out of the Syrian regime, that is, pulled out of the city, the people of Mara came together and protected their museum. And we've seen many examples like this repeatedly across. In terms of the demand end, obviously, I think we need to see changes to legislation, I think, changes to maybe making it, criminalizing, if you will, buyers who do not follow due diligence, who do not really check to see if what they are buying has been looted, and not to simply rely on very lax and loose measures that are already in place. And one last thing I would say, we also have new technologies that are available to us that can also help us track and monitor these what could potentially be looted goods. On, for example, and I'm going to just cite two of these new technological developments. One is a substance called smart water. It's an invisible marker, and when you apply it to objects, you can't see it. It is indelible, and at the same time, it has a unique signature to it. And we've already done this to thousands of objects in the Ma'ara Museum, where you can only see it with a UV light. And I believe the Iraqi authorities in their museums have just started a major project marking all the contents of their museums with smart water. I think such a methodology that can truly show you the origin, at least of your collections in your museums or in your storerooms, in case those get attacked or looted. You have a means for identifying where they came from, and then then you can work towards restitution or evidence for restitution. And the other one is basically developing new 3D photogrammetric technologies, where we can now use images taken from Facebook, taken from active looting videos or content that is available to us, and then developing these complex, highly detailed 3D images that can then be provided to law enforcement agencies and to entities that work towards identifying, tracking, trafficking in looted antiquities. I think using this combination of changes in legislation, applying new technologies, can also help us in containing and protecting cultural heritage sites and monuments.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And I will give the floor to Eva, but for 3 weeks ago, we launched the report on museum during COVID, and we were very struck to see that we had, from 2012 to today, more than 95,000 museums, of which 60% are new ones. So what you are talking with us, it's very important, because we see that it gives also an opportunity to use technology to ensure the traceability of the object and the artifact. So we are very, very happy to see that some of the countries where most of the artifacts are looted are trying to use these new ways of the technology. Eva, dear Eva, we know that there are so many archaeological sites and that it's impossible to protect and monitor all of them. Sometimes they are not even discovered yet, and it's the case in your region. How does Honduras protect archaeological sites against smuggling, and particularly on sites located in remote areas?
Yes. Well, not being able to protect and monitor all archaeological sites is a fact. It's a reality we have to deal with. We have registered over 5,000 archaeological sites in Honduras. So we keep an inventory as a protection measure, but only 14 of those are under direct custody of the state. And of those, 6 are open to the public. So we have different levels of administration, management, and protection. Considering this, it's not feasible for the state by itself to guarantee the protection of all archaeological sites. And that's why the Honduran Institute of Anthropology and History has implemented a program, which I would like to talk about a little bit more, that we call the guardarrecursos culturales, which can be translated as the guardians or keepers of cultural heritage. So the main objective of this program is to engage local communities and non-governmental stakeholders in the protection of cultural heritage. So in order to do that, we have started a series of capacity building workshops and activities that with the intention to provide stakeholders with theoretical knowledge in general about archaeology and conservation, but also with practical skills required to actively participate in the preservation of cultural resources, including being able to identify an archaeological site, helping us to keep the inventories, and helping the Institute with the monitoring, which is the tricky part. So the training of these keepers or guardians of cultural heritage is also part of a larger project aimed to encourage community involvement in the social appropriation of cultural heritage and promote respect for diversity and just foster local participation in the process of cultural heritage management. I mean, in the decision-making process. So we are developing a network of these guardians or keepers of cultural resources, and we're still working on the network, we're still working on the trainings, but we are hoping right now, during the pandemic, these alliances and having this local communities taking an active part of the protection of the archaeological sites, it's going to, well, they're going to help us, they're helping us protect the sites, but we are going to receive a lot of information from them, information that we don't have at this point. So as I said before, we still don't know the magnitude of the looting that is going on in the country right now. So I would just want to finish saying that this program aims to concentrate on prevention, on protecting the archaeological sites before the archaeological context is lost forever. And I think Marina mentioned this, and as archaeologists, of course, we're concerned about the integrity of the archaeological context, because we know when it's gone, and we lost it forever. So that's why I wanted to emphasize this program, because prevention is very important, engaging local communities, also being more aware as archaeologists of the impact of our archaeological projects in terms of the protection of the site. We make them more visible with our excavations, and sometimes we don't follow up in we don't think about the long term protection and conservation. So it's an ethical issue, but I think it's a good time right now to reflect on the responsibilities of.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Eva. We are agree. And what is important that right now we are aware that community should be part of the solution and not only with the identity, but also in the protection. And that's great, because I think that's a new way of trying to involve the community to understand their history. So we are very keen of this reflection. Dear Vincent, according to your knowledge of the difficulties in conflict areas, what could be the role of local communities, as we were talking right now, in the protection of this cultural property? Vincent, vous avez le floor.
Fighting traffic, it's also like a repetition of warning message that already exists and that must be just applied. We don't need sometime more and more and more new law, new measure. No, we just apply. And the first guardian, the first heritage protector are the local people. But effective action is not in the interior, but systematically in concerted interdisciplinary action, heritage, investigation, law, justice, together. First, we need a political will. We need individual, of course, awareness. And you have to strengthen control and repression and to have, of course, the means to fight. It takes an awareness that behind stolen antiquity, it's a looting, it's a destruction, but it's also an offense. It's a loss of information because the object is taken out of its context, its history, but it's also a theft that feeds criminal network. We must act in the same time. There isn't two levels. Same level, we must act with populations, especially in countries where the state is not able to protect its own heritage because of conflict, because of critic and crisis situation, where we can't apply the heritage protection. The population, in this case, is therefore a main lever. Continue to alert, raise awareness, educate, and train on the scourge of the illegal market so that people are proud of its heritage, protect it. And they can no longer say, as dealer or buyer, oh, we don't know that the object came from looting. We are in good faith. No, looting, kill, trafficking, kill your heritage also. It's really necessary to favor the reappropriation by the population of their own history, of their own heritage, to create a real link between the past and the present. Alors, among the educational action, the organization of Chuck exhibition on the fight against the trafficking of cultural property is a good initiative, like in the Museum of Genève in Switzerland, or in the airport of Beirut in Lebanon, like those of Carabinieri, or like I would like to make in the Museum of Louvre to show seized objects. This awareness leads, as we see in Libya, to restitution by the population of objects they discover to the Department of Antiquity, local population. At the same time, it's very necessary to carry out a repressive action with a clear process from identification of object to legalization of the case and restitution of stolen artifacts. By strengthening the relationship between the different actors, we are not isolated, we can't do that, which are complementary and essential to create link. We must to create, or again, in each country, a real operational and reactive task force. And this is where archaeologists and curators can be instigators. I put, not archaeologists in the middle, I put all the service of investigation, custom, police. And in France, we are fortunate because we have OCBC, we have also a custom, but we need to have a specialized police and also aware, custom aware people for this. These two bodies are very complementary, and they just need the support of network of scientific experts to document, to study objects circulating on our market, as the chair, by example, Attar, very good example, is not only the use of a list of a stolen object published by Interpol or published in the Art Lost Register database, but also it's the use of ICOM, red list, of category of objects threatened by looting that must be consulted in order to be vigilant. And finally, it's absolutely necessary to have trained and specialized magistrates. And also we have the whole chain.
Merci, Vincent. Yes, we're going to speak about this, but the last meeting that we had online with Interpol and the other stakeholders of this issue showed us that if the magistrats are not part of this, we will not get the solution. And that's something that we are very aware, and somehow we should do this job. Also, to say that what we have seen in the last years is when member states have the possibility to create these special forces, we see results, and it comes to tackle some of these illicit trafficking. So we are very agree. Dear Marina, how can national laws protect cultural property that has not been discovered yet? Why is the principle of state ownership of subsoil so important?
Thank you, Ernesto. Yes, states can do a lot. The national legislation, of course, we've seen is extremely important. As Vincent just said, with no implementation, they are useless. They need to be implemented. At national level, I would, Eva, in the first question also, in a part, gave responses. States should first regulate illicit excavation. It is in the 1970 Convention, because the more we know, the better it is. Then illegal excavation will happen, but on sites which are known, because supervised and known. So this is very important. Mapping of archaeological sites is essential. We need to know what is there, to know. So even if we don't know the object, we know where they, or we may know where they come from. What is very important to add on what you said on prosecution, it's important that such activities are prosecuted and sanctioned. States need to have a good criminal law. And permit me again to speak about synergies of instruments, legal instruments. In 2017, the Council of Europe enacted the Nicosia Convention on offenses relating to cultural objects. It is a very important, it's open to non-European states, and it is very important because it helps countries to criminalize actions such as illicit excavation and have sanctions. Then unlawful excavation and removal. Also placing on the market. The next panel will speak about online sales. The person who place on the market such object should be prosecuted, should be sanctioned. It's very difficult to find this currently in legislation. Falsification of documents. And also what is very important, jurisdiction. For example, if a country, let's say Finland, has in its legislation a provision which says that illegal excavation is prohibited and can be prosecuted, even if a Finn goes to Iraq, Syria to excavate, they will be prosecuted. Because this is, people could not believe that they come from a country, they go to another country, they dig, they steal, and nothing happens because it happened in another country. So these are very important texts that states should take the benefit of. They do exist. And of course, they should do it and share. You have spoken, I should have probably, about due diligence. Give people in the chain the tools to prove diligence. You know, under the UNIDO Convention, if a possessor has an object which was stolen, he will give it back. And if he cannot prove the exercise of due diligence, he will not have compensation. This is, we are talking sometimes of high values. So why the principle of state ownership is so important? Most of the countries have legislation saying that they are the owner of the subsoil. But we've seen then when an object comes out in another country, they have enormous problems to have this legislation having effects. So with, and for many reasons, either because it's too vague or because people were not aware of the legislation and for other reasons. This is why in 2011, again, cooperation between organizations, the UNIDO and UNESCO have created with experts those model provision on state ownership of undiscovered cultural objects. This is very simple, 6 provisions to be taken by states included in their legislation to protect those undiscovered objects. A definition, who should take care of, the state, that what is an undiscovered, then in a very clear way, which cannot be then questioned in a court abroad, what is state ownership. The word ownership is fundamental. Then that those objects are deemed stolen, they will, any transfer will not be, will be null, and even internationally. So these are, it's not a normative instrument, but it's these are 6 provisions which states could use. And of course, this year is the 50th anniversary of the 1970 Convention. It is also the 25th anniversary of the UNIDO Convention. We will all celebrate also together those 2 instruments, and I'm sure it will be, UNIDO is of course only on restitution, and it's a legal instrument, but I'm sure that our 2 organizations, UNESCO, will raise awareness on those issues continuously as they always did, and we will do the same. And happy anniversary, Nesta.
For you too.
Thank you.
No, yes, in 2 or 3 weeks, we're gonna launch the campaign that we are working on for more than all the period of confinement, and it's important that we take up to our next level. So right now, it's not only to take our word, but it's also what if I'm not wrong, Vincent said. The stolen is about the identity also of the history that has been built by many communities. And that's what is important. It's not the object, the artifact, is what it means for a whole community, people that are living for many years. And you are stealing part of the soul that we say in Latin America. You are stealing the soul, the soul. Maria, freeports are appreciated by traffickers of cultural property due to national laws that are generally favorable to protect the confidentiality of transactions and imports within them. In fact, several recent cases show that some art dealers have imported and stored works of art obtained illegally until they can be resold. Dear Maria, could you tell us from your experience, what is the role of free ports in the traffic of illegally excavated objects, and whether free ports should be more regulated? It's a question.
Thank you, Ernesto. Indeed, a very good question. And I think it's a very big challenge for the whole customs community. So I will rather rely on the experience of our members rather than my own personal experience. Indeed, this question is a very problematic one, but generally, in as far as customs enforcement and general enforcement measures related to the free ports are in question. Because in fact, the way how the free ports are built is in the institutional framework and also the legal framework, etc. It allows for a lot of, for much less oversight than usually would be exercised on a normal customs territory. There was even a question on whether the free ports are a part of the sovereign territory of particularly the customs territory of the state or not. And the WCO developed a specific instrument in that regard. It is the revised Kyoto Convention, specific Annex D, Chapter 2, which regulates this question and stipulates that the free zones or free ports, or whatever you call them, because there are different names and typologies of those, are a part of the customs territories as far as the enforcement is concerned, but they are not a part of the customs territory insofar as duties and taxes are concerned. Because of course, the whole idea is that basically you have a huge duty-free that is available in the country, right? So the concern of the government is usually that if there is more enforcement and more supervision and more oversight, this will debilitate trade, and the trade flows will not be able to be exercised in the way that they would. So basically the trade facilitation would be questioned. But it is very important to underline that with the appropriate controls and the risk management measures, trade facilitation doesn't have to come at the expense of the enforcement measures. Therefore, we don't really need to sacrifice the enforcement and the controls in the free trade zones at the expense of I mean, we don't have to sacrifice them in order to improve facilitation, trade facilitation that is, of course, the cornerstone of the business of the free ports. Now, when it comes to the specific free ports that deal with cultural goods, they are specific. Why? Because usually they deal with what we call in our professional jargon, we call high value goods. And these high value goods do not necessarily only, I mean, they are not necessarily limited to the cultural objects. They can be also including some, for example, precious gemstones, diamonds. They also include very rare cars, etc. So basically, whatever the millionaire would like to store in a secret location for an undefined period of time. Oh, and of course, this person would not really want to store it in his house or in the bank, right? So basically, this is the idea behind these particular free ports. On top of that, these free ports have another feature, which is they're highly secured areas. So the territory is extremely secured. You have a vault, you have all the types of procedures around it. So basically, it's extremely difficult to penetrate the free port. And therefore, it becomes also a challenge for law enforcement who do not have the appropriate oversight and control over those free ports. I have to tell you that, in fact, there have been a lot of movement in terms of regulating the activity of the free ports and proposing more oversight over the free ports in order to avoid different types of criminal and nefarious activities, including money laundering, including the counterfeit goods, including the storage of cultural objects of the high value that were stolen, etc. And in particular, such entities as Financial Action Task Force took a real step forward in this regard, as well as the WCO, so our organization in cooperation with the OECD. So there was a specific recommendation on the enhancing transparency in the free zones that was developed. On the national level, that was developed last year and adopted by the Council of the OECD. Another point was that in Switzerland in particular, so on the national level, Switzerland took an opportunity to develop and totally modify its legislation when it comes to the oversight and controls in the free port. In particular, of course, we tackle the Freeport of Geneva, that has given law enforcement agencies, both customs and police, much bigger role in the management of the free port, which was really a welcome step because, for example, now you cannot store your goods in the free port forever. Your limit is 6 months. So, for example, also you cannot really register the goods on the offshore company. So that would not be an option anymore, and unfortunately it was. So that is why most of the objects that were stored in the Freeport for 20, 30 years, nobody knew what was inside the box, nobody knew who brought it, nobody knew who it belongs to, because everything was pretty much anonymized. So as far as Switzerland is concerned, in particular, the Freeport of Geneva, because of this change of legislation, this is not an issue anymore. But of course, what we also saw, and this is another side of the issue, is that the moment when Switzerland introduced this legislation, we heard that basically there was a lot of flow. I mean, there was a big flow of these high value objects from out of Geneva. So basically people were moving their possessions elsewhere. So basically the moment you shut down one vault, the other one will open. And this is pretty much the game that we usually are a part of, unfortunately.
Yes, we see. Okay, we could stay the whole day. It's so interesting, everything that you are giving us as information and a subject that is so important right now. But I will take 3 questions that I received from some delegation, but also from the audience. So I would try to select them. Nicole Hoffman from the audience is asking Vincent especially, have there been documented reports with evidence of the increased looting of archaeological sites during the COVID-19 pandemic? Specifically, what countries or region have been affected? Do you have this information, Vincent? Or whoever wants to answer? Vincent, le micro.
Ah, voilà. Sorry. Yeah, of course. I'm scientific and archaeologist, donc all what I say about the country is based on real information. There, I would like to thank everyone who sent me evaluation information from Bosnia, from Tunisia, from Libya, from Palestine, from Lebanon, from Syria. Of course, we have evidence. We have evidence about metal detector. We have evidence also in Palestine, by example, by fighting between people because they want the treasure and they fight himself, and there is 6 person die because of this kind of problem. Also, the problem is in the isolate area where people, where police, where custom can't go because they are busy about what I say, Maria from the mask, from liquid, and some isolate area where open space for trafficking, for looting, because nobody inspect them. And after now, we will see day by day all the artifacts, maybe on internet in few days, because before we said no, there is maybe 20, 30 years between the looting and the sale. Now it's like immediately. There is, because of internet, there is not a receipt. It's a polymorph trafficking from a small peasant who we found coins, from people who need intermediary and people who sell directly by internet.
Yes.
That's the difficulty of it. It's not one way.
Yes. It has changed. It has moved. It's dynamic. It's changing. We have another question from the delegation of Peru for Maria. How state parties of the convention could strengthen mutual actions with customs to fight the illicit traffic of cultural property? How we can do more?
Thank you. Thank you for the question to the delegation of Peru. I think one of the most critical things is something we started from, that when we look at the number of actors that are involved into preserving the cultural heritage, prosecuting the crime, etc., we have at least 4 major institutions on the national level, and these new institutions need to cooperate. There are different institutional settings for this type of cooperation, be it formal, informal, hierarchical or not. And in fact, the WCO in its PEACH program, which is the special training program for the customs officers on the prevention of illicit trafficking of cultural heritage, developed a specific module where we address these questions, because of course the problem is if customs cannot do anything if customs is not backed up by the other agencies. If the Ministry of Culture, which is the lead agency in this particular area, is not interested in the subject, then it's very difficult to mobilize law enforcement, be it customs or police, to act. So that is why even our trainings would bring no result if we are not supported by the police, by the Ministry of Culture, and eventually by the prosecutor's office. Because the whole point is not just to seize the goods at the border, the whole point is to ensure that after they are seized, there are consequences for the traffickers, there are consequences for the dealers, that the prosecution does take place and these people do not commit these crimes anymore. And by the way, starting from customs is also not really the best way to do things, because we are the grim witnesses of the crime that has already been committed. The objects were looted. We are there to stop it. So something has to be done on the prevention end. And of course, as far as the prevention is concerned, it's less of a customs matter, and it is a more important matter for the police colleagues, etc. However, there is one particular point I would like to mention here, and is the following. In fact, customs does play an important role when it comes to the oversight of the territory, because we have a function of moving and ensuring that the territory, the customs territory, is intact. In some countries, customs have a power to go inside the country. In other countries, the customs have a power to work exclusively at the border.
Yes.
Right, but that means we have a monitoring mechanism in place. We have the brigades, we have the people that go in there and monitor those locations. Now, what was important, and that this was the idea that came up when we were doing our field work and trainings in West Africa, in particular in the conflict zones and or close to the areas that are affected by violence, is that when customs go on patrol, it could be interesting to find out the locations, the geolocations of the archaeological sites, so that they would be included into the route of those patrolling teams that would be able to see basically, you know, if there is some sort of an activity that is going on. Because of course, this is not really their primary function. This is not the core function of customs. However, since they are exposed to going into those areas, if they knew that there was an archaeological site nearby, they could just at least ensure that nothing criminal or suspicious was going on that particular site. There is one more important point here. So when we did research in West Africa in particular, we found out that there are a number of archaeological and paleontological sites, in particular in countries like Niger, that are located at the border, which means that when it comes to trafficking, it's much easier to traffic because you basically go to the archaeological site, you take the objects there, and off you go, you cross the border, and nobody can stop you anymore. So that is why even the awareness, the geolocation awareness for the customs officers and also for the police teams would be very, very critical and important. And today we have all types of mechanisms. We have the geospatial technology available, and this is something that we at WCO are working on for other crime areas, not necessarily or only for cultural heritage, but also for others. And I think archaeologists can play here an important role because they're the ones who actually have a knowledge on the location of these archaeological sites. So in particular, when it comes to countries in Latin America, such as Peru, that have a very rich cultural heritage sites, I think the most of them are in fact also already geolocated. So one of the ideas would be, please talk to your colleagues in law enforcement and discuss about the possibility of transferring this type of knowledge and seeing how to integrate it into their patrol functions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear panelists. We are flying, time is flying, but thank you so much for taking time, because at the end you are taking your time to share with us your experience and reflection and ideas. And only to conclude this first panel, if we can retain some elements that we heard. Well, everybody has been talking about how challenging it has been this period of COVID-19 pandemic to the fight against illegal excavation, and the valuable intervention of you, our panelists today, is confirming that this challenge is complex and is multifaceted. It's as you said before, you cannot take one step by step. It's an ecosystem, and it should work very, very together. The lack of control, especially in remote areas, has increased illicit excavation and of archaeological sites at a time when people were looking to find an alternative to survive, at a time where there is more awareness amongst the population of the high value of this cultural property, and that at a time when people have access to metal detectors and technological tools. In addition, while law enforcement officials, including custom officials, are busy combating the increase in cybercrime, sale of counterfeit healthcare and sanitary products, they may have been less vigilant to illegal excavation because they were forced also to have new priorities. But we are not helpless in the face of COVID-19. Our collective experience has shown that we can devise instruments to fight illicit excavation and illicit trafficking, even at the time of a crisis like the one that we are living. This requires our collective efforts as well as innovative policy solutions. I can also mention three that I heard: using new technologies to help us track looted properties and conducting documentary watch on internet and social networks. Tackling the issue both from the supply and demand end. We need to both work with communities leaders, empowering the local population, the communities to protect their property, and work on criminalizing buyers that do not make proper checks. And we heard from all of you. Ensuring the cooperation between member states, the complementarity of international treaties, and most importantly, their implementation, because if we sign it, but we don't put it on the ground, we will not get it. Lastly, prevention remains the efficient way to fight the phenomena of illicit trafficking, and that's the conclusion. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that everybody has, I will not say enjoyed, but was very happy to hear this reflection in a time where we need more information and we need to work together. So thank you so much to all of you for having participating with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will switch for the second panel on online trade. And first of all, I will welcome the following experts that are with us. Christos Tsiroganis, Associate Professor, Aarhus Institute of Advanced Studies in Denmark. He's a forensic archaeologist researching international illicit antiquities trafficking networks through the identification of illicit antiquities in auction houses, galleries, museum, and private collection. He worked for the Greek Minister of Culture and Justice and for the Greek Police Art Squad before joining Greece Repatriation Task Force. He developed interdisciplinary methods at the ERC-funded Trafficking Culture Project. His articles delve into the duplicious practices in the art market, museum ethics, forgeries, and government policy in cultural heritage protection. We have also with us Cathy Paul, co-director, Antiquities, Trafficking, and Heritage Anthropology Research at our project. Cathy Paul is an anthropologist and research analyst who specializes in tracking criminal activity on online platforms such as Facebook that we heard recently. She's co-director of the Antiquities, Trafficking, and Heritage Anthropology Research and a founding member of the Alliance to Counter Crime Online, ACO. Corrado Catesi, Head of Work of Arts Unit of Interpol. He is a Lieutenant Colonel of the Italian Carabinieri Corps and the Interpol Works of Art Unit Coordinator. He dedicated his last 16 years of professional experience in the fight against the illicit traffic of cultural property at national and international level. He is the Interpol contact point to coordinate the Interpol action with all other international and regional organizations involved in the field. And well, I have also my colleague, Lazare Elundu Asomo, Director of Culture and Emergency Entity, Secretary of the UNESCO 70 Convention, and Director for the Culture and Emergency at UNESCO since November 2018. The entity for which he is responsible deals with all matters regarding the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural objects, the return and restitution of cultural objects, the protection of cultural heritage in emergency situation, the protection of underwater heritage, and the promotion of museums. It's important that you know that we have also invited other panelists from, especially we decided to invite them from online how is it? Yes. I forgot the name. Platforms, thank you. But they declined the invitation, so they send us letters. So but it's important to understand that this discussion, we should have it with all, as I said before, with all the stakeholders of the situation that we are living. But I'm very happy to have you all here with us. And well, we received in April the Antiquities, Trafficking and Heritage Anthropology Research project that reported an increase in posts and several months on Facebook group dedicated to looted objects as thieves took advantage of COVID-19 lockdowns across the Middle East and North Africa to loot places like mosques, museum, and archaeological sites that were left with less security protection. So we go straight to the questions. De Christos, you are known as a forensic archaeologist and you work on identifying illicit antiquities. Have you seen an increase in online sale of cultural property during COVID-19 pandemic? How do you identify objects that were illegally exported when they are on sale online? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ernesto. Thank you very much, UNESCO, for organizing this, and especially during this period. And particularly, I would like to thank Fabiana for making this actually happen and get in touch with every one of us. To reply to your first question, I would say that, first of all, the market was obliged to go online because there was no other option. So traditionally, there were held auctions in the rooms, there in the sale rooms, or previously will also, before the auctions, will organize viewings of the objects themselves, that people could walk in and visit and see the objects themselves before they are making any decisions on acquiring them or not. All these ended during this period for the first time, and I'm talking about the high-end, the so-called reputable, for me in inverted commas, market members, auction houses and known dealers in antiquities were primarily forced very early enough to make sales completely exclusively online. The result was that, very simply to put it, nothing has changed practically. So objects that they used before the COVID-19 period to appear with very little or an unjustified provenance continued in the same way to appear during the online sales during this period. Very little or none due diligence proved not to have happened, not to have taken place, not even basic steps in provenance research. And there were some cases that have been identified and reached also the press, which proved that point. So practically nothing changed in reality. The only thing is that we went online exclusively. What I have noticed going through the sales and waiting for most of them to appear is the changing of the dates by the market. It shows that even the market was taken by surprise of the situation. They have announced initial dates on running these sales, and then they were pushing them back all the time, re-announcing them, taking back the objects from their online platforms and so on, reappearing the objects and so on, delaying to see what will be the regulations in each country that the objects themselves were physically stored in order to appear to the rescheduled sales and so on. And finally, they produce this online sales, and they keep doing that. I'm always talking about the high end, the so-called reputable market, the top level antiquities market. Now, how I'm doing this research, to answer the second part of your question, is that more than 15 years now, I have been given official access, in writing also, by judicial authorities from various countries, and they have given me confiscated archives by well-known dealers and traffickers after they have been raided and these have been discovered. Due to this, I have the opportunity to organize this and build a database, but I enriched it over the years from with other information, other photographic and other material that is reaching to me through the public or other members of our globalized community, and therefore is not limited to what I've initially been given officially. In this way, I'm able to identify illicit objects depicted in these archives and notify the various governments to repatriate. However, for me as an academic, this is only the first step towards a much wider research, which is to identify how the trafficking networks in a local and especially international level are working, who is participating, and also who is doing his job in order to dismantle these networks and who is not doing this job, and how this job is being done or how is not being done, and what is needed to be done further from a neutral academic position, which enables me to criticize everyone as long as we have the evidence, which is what matters. Now, the last thing that I wanted to say is that apart from these confiscated photographic archives, the last few years I am developing a new method which identifies objects, problematic and provenance or illicit objects, without the need of having access to these photographs, to these confiscated archives. And in order to enable every kind of researcher, either a colleague archaeologist or whoever who is interested to do that, to produce original work in this field of illicit antiquities research. And based on a case that I had against Christie's in London in 2015, Fabiana is very busy. It was given the opportunity to identify also an object that is not depicted in any archive. There is no actual proof of it. However, because I publicized before the auction that the object, I proved that there was specific problems with the provenance of the object, where known traffickers were masked, disguised as collectors, or they were completely taken away from the provenance of the object. It was a lekithos of 5th century BC, Greek vase. Christie's withdrew that object as well, together with 3 objects identified from the archives, which proved that we can have original results without necessarily having access to this photographic archive, and therefore anyone can do it. What I'm doing in Aarhus Institute of Advanced Studies for the coming 2.5 years at least is to develop further this method and present it and give it to the colleagues in order to use it without having this privileged, of course, access to this photographic archives.
Archive. Very well, thank you. Katie, in June 2019, ATA published a report concerning the trade of cultural property on social media. The report revealed that ancient relics, antiquities, and treasures from the Middle East were being looted and trafficked on Facebook. Did COVID-19 also impact online trade of cultural property? And if so, how? Welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. Happy 75th anniversary. Absolutely, we saw an impact during COVID-19 lockdowns, and particularly being able to see that online. There are several reasons, as Amr had mentioned earlier, why there would be an increase in looting during this time period. Taking the crisis aside, this is favorable weather time of year. You do have the crisis where authorities are occupied with enforcing the lockdown as opposed to enforcing other issues. And then you have the added element of many people stuck at home and online. So not only are we seeing an increase in the activity, we're seeing that reflected in their activity online. And just as an example for how much growth we saw in this area, one of the 120 or so groups that the Athar project is currently monitoring, it was the largest group we had monitored, and it had around 300,000 members on Facebook in March when the pandemic lockdowns really started. And within a 1-month period, that one group gained 128,000 new members. It's close to 500,000 members now. And that particular group is focused on more of the looting side of things. And that's not just offering artifacts for sale, but actually showing progress while looting whether that's a mosaic in situ or a site that's been looted. And I can actually share an example here, if I can share my screen, of one of the videos from that group. Here we go. So I'm not sure if everybody can see this, but this is an example of one of the photos that was posted. I did highlight that this was earlier in the pandemic. So this is when there were 300,000 members in this particular group. And you'll see people posting videos like this while in progress looting. Clearly, this is not the typical type of excavation you would see during a proper excavation. There's a lot of just rudimentary digging and hacking that's taken place at this site. And we've seen other examples like this, where individuals post and ask for tips on how much further they should dig, what they're going to encounter. And we're really seeing this crowdsourcing of looting knowledge. So not only do we have the issue of trafficking of illicit objects online, which we've seen with eBay and other platforms, but with Facebook, you also have this element of crowdsourcing looting knowledge. So the average person who may not have had access to a group of people with that knowledge before can now get online, join one of these Facebook groups, and there are literal infographics showing people how they can loot, videos giving them examples of what to do, how the soil changes. And this is all incredibly concerning. The one silver lining to this kind of activity is that it's giving us a window into a step in the process that wasn't publicly available before. And for examples where we have items that have been offered in situ, like mosaics, that means there's an opportunity to stop that artifact from leaving the ground, or at the very least leaving the country. In some cases, these videos are actually posted live on Facebook, so we know that they're happening in real time and not archived versions that have been posted later. This is something that's really important to consider, and particularly for authorities in these countries, if they're able to monitor the Facebook groups as they're happening, there may be a better chance of stopping those items from leaving the ground. So that's one silver lining, and particularly because so many of the artifacts we're seeing appear in these Facebook groups are either still in the ground or freshly looted, and there is no documentation, like the archives Christos mentioned, to prove that those items ever existed. So this is really critical evidence that the Athar Project has been working for about 2 years now to document and preserve before it's removed from the internet. So at the very least, we have that initial preservation showing that this item is in fact illegal, was still in the ground in a particular country, and we're able to save that for eventual restitution in the future.
That's great. That's great. And the second question I will give you. Right now, Caro Corrado, could you please tell us what action are undertaken by Interpol regarding online trade of illicitly trafficked cultural property, and what is the impact of COVID-19 on law enforcement regarding online trade? Corrado, please.
Dear Ernesto, thank you very much to give me the floor. Good evening to all of you. And first of all, happy anniversary, because this is a very important day for all of us. The illicit traffic of cultural property is a transnational crime that affects all regions of the world, and no countries can consider itself immune from this crime. Why? Because this is one of the most profitable crime areas for the organized crime group. And since 2015, thanks to what it was established by the United Nations Security Council, is also a way for terrorism to gain income from this activity, especially from Syria and Iraq. And we know, without doubts, that the illicit traffic of cultural property is ongoing online, in online sales. Of course, not but is ongoing on. For this reason, we are acting as Interpol. We are acting, of course, we are an international police organization. We cannot carry out a direct investigation, but one of our first duty is to train our specialized police unit dedicated to fight the illicit traffic of cultural property in this specific field. And also the basic action that we are doing is to encourage the countries to establish this specialized police unit, because to looking for stolen objects of art, illicit excavated objects of art in the normal market is difficult, but in online sale is more difficult. Well, without a specialized police unit, it's really impossible to tackle this kind of crime, especially when it's going online. And because we never know where these objects are when these objects are on the online sales, if they are in the same country where the specialized police unit are looking for, or in the other part, where is the seller, where are in the foot of the buyer. Well, it's a very complex investigation. Well, for this reason, we are encouraging the countries to set up the specialized police unit. We are going worldwide to train the police forces in this specific field. But the most important actions that we are doing with our international and regional partners is to carry out operation to fight the illicit traffic of cultural property. And in this field, I have to say that since 2017, with the regional operation Pandora Second that was run during the first global operation Athena that we made with WCO and Europol, we decided to focus especially on the online sale to try to identify really not the volume of this activity, of course, but to test the situation. What we saw was important because in the last edition of Pandora 4 and the global operation Athena Second, more than 8,670 items stolen and illicitly excavated were seized by police and customs. It means that it's 30% of the global amount of the seized objects were seized in the online sale. And the most part of these objects were archaeological objects. Coming to your second question, during the COVID-19, of course, as a police, we, in all countries, the police forces, especially where specialized police units were not set up, were used to improve the confinement, to make the respect of the confinement. Well, specific investigation during that period, were not carried out, were absolutely not possible. It was possible, of course, where the specialized police unit were set up, even if, of course, the possibility to act was different. But it was told before, the crime used this period to move his energy from one side to another. As a police, we made the same things, even if our actions in the time was less than before.
Thank you, Corrado. Moshe Lazar, now we go to you. As the Secretary of the UNESCO 70 Convention on Fighting Illicit Trafficking on Cultural Property, you have noted the growing concern of member states regarding this scourge. How can the convention be strengthened in light of what has been said by the previous speakers?
Thank you very much, Ernesto, and good afternoon to everyone who are listening to us. It is true that we can say that there has been an amplifying effect on the role of internet and the problematic of illegal trade, definitely. But what also we need to consider is that although this is unprecedented in nature, I mean, this new issue fits definitely in the larger context of what many member states and state parties have been noticing for some time now. So this is to say that this question has gained such importance that, since 2017, already, state parties started initiating an extensive work on how to strengthen the 1970 convention and to try to reinforce, their fight against illicit trafficking. And the question was even so important that, it was considered by all the member states of UNESCO in the last general conference also. So it's really a priority. And I think it's important that we say it loudly, that it is a priority in UNESCO, and that here we at UNESCO we are supporting, because state parties have enshrined their trust in us to conduct successfully, this mission that will lead to strengthening the convention. And you said it right there, the convention is now 50 years. But 50 years ago, the convention was created in a totally different environment and in global context. And so the best thing to strengthen this is that we need to adapt our methods to reflect this new reality. And I think to adapt our work will mean to adapt the tools that state parties and member states have here with the support of UNESCO. That is, the 1970 convention has an operational guidelines that try to explain clearly how to implement the convention. I think this tool needs to be revisited. And this is something that the state parties will definitely have to do. But we also have to take in consideration the fact that, there are new ethics, and we've discussed it, that needs to be considered. And lastly, the issue of capacity building activities. And I like just to go quickly through the 3 points. Regarding the fact that we need to revisit the operational guidelines. And I think it's because this issue of online sales needs to really better, considered in it, including also the issues of illegal excavation. On the same thing also on the ethics, as everyone know, there is a code of ethics for the art dealers, and this needs also to be, I would say, updated, and to include some of the diligence provisions, that oblige traders to make, stringent inquiries on the provenance of the cultural object. But we need also to continue, alerting, and we have to reinforce it, the auction houses also on the need for them really to be much more clear and transparent on the provenance of the object that is going. And on capacity building, as I said clearly, the convention is working on Article 5, and it's important that we continue to encourage, all the member states to put in place in their territories more national services, that will be able to continue monitor, also auctions and online sales to reach out everywhere where it is possible. And lastly, the partnerships. And I think our partners, and someone said it clearly, that it's important that we rethink the way we partner, we rethink the way we're working. And I think we have to enlarge it to also include, some of the very important projects that we have seen in the past, like the one with ATAR project. That's what I wanted to say at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Lazare. Thank you. Well, we've been discussing about the increase of online trade of cultural properties during COVID-19. We're going to do the same that we did before in the other panel. We're going to try to look at what measures could be taken to limit the scourge. So, Christos, please, you have been monitoring online sales for some times now. So could you please tell us a little bit more how to process online trade on cultural property works? Do you think that this could be better regulated? And if so, how can this be done?
Well, the results that we have all these years, the last few years, looking back, either the last 50 years of the UNESCO Convention onwards, or the last 15 years that our knowledge about how this market used to work and continues to work has been multiplied and publicized widely, shows that there is a great need of strengthening the regulations to change this market. Because in reality, it hasn't been changed. It's continuing selling illicit objects in its various levels, not only in the highest end, but the bottom end of the supply. I hear colleagues and other stakeholders in meetings throughout the world every year to end usually their talks about how we can cooperate, how we can strengthen the laws, how to make them more strict, to update regulations, legislations, conventions, and so on. And this is being repeated every year. But actually, what has not happened is that I haven't seen anyone, and we generally haven't seen anyone of the so-called big fishes in the market, the ones that they really control the market, to literally end up behind the bars. We have seen people that they are participating in constantly in the trafficking chain, in the lowest levels of that they have been actually jailed and spent time in jail, but we haven't seen the high-end members of the market ending up behind the bars. And in this regard, this crime is completely differently treated from any other kind of crimes, which the sanctions are not only immediate, but enforced and actually being jailed. And this is really bad that is not happening, and antiquities, illicit antiquities field is still an exception. And this is primarily what should be changed actively to fight it, because that will pass a message to everyone else in order, and then you will see a reduction in both ends of supply and demand that we have heard from Amr before and other participants of the previous panel. So the online market and the market in general will continue to act in the same way as long as active solutions are not being taken, and as long as this crime is continued to be treated as an exception when you compare it to any other crimes.
Very well. Katie, dear Katie, how is the online trade of illicitly trafficked cultural property linked to violent extremism and terrorism? In your opinion, what are the measures to be adopted by countries to reinforce the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural property?
So in terms of what the Athar Project has monitored on Facebook, there are multiple extremist groups and militants that are involved in the trade online. And this is based on both what we've seen on the platform as well as ground sourcing information from the day after that has confirmed those findings. And we're not just talking about ISIS. There are a lot of regional and local extremist groups that are engaging in this activity on the platform and largely going unnoticed. But it is worth noting that a report earlier this year from, it was the 25th report of the Analytical and Sanctions Monitoring Team pursuant to Resolution 2368 concerning ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They did look at the funding issues for those particular extremist groups and specifically noted that Facebook and the sale of antiquities on Facebook was a source of funding for these groups and urged member states to develop police units to specifically look at this issue. Of course, that's difficult because the broader issue of antiquities trafficking doesn't often have units that can dedicate to that, let alone to looking at a social media platform. One of the benefits of the social media platforms like this are that they are open source. And if you have the right understanding of how to infiltrate these groups and are able to monitor them, it can be really valuable and a not a huge resource consuming effort on the part of authorities, because you're not having to send people out into the field first. You can actually get those tips based on what you're seeing on the platform. And Author Project is developing training modules to help authorities be able to capitalize on this type of intelligence. And the thing about this is that it's not just applicable to antiquities, but there are a lot of illicit trades that are taking place on the platform, including the trade in endangered wildlife, for example. And sometimes we do see these cross over with antiquities trafficking groups. So it's a knowledge that's really important for broader illicit trafficking that authorities can monitor on the platforms. It is unfortunate that some of the tech platforms were not able to participate today, because there is a problem with, on their end, a lack of enforcement of their policies. We're thrilled to see that Facebook has instituted a new policy in their community standards for cultural property. There was not previously a policy regarding illicit cultural property on the platform. But we have seen what they have done with regard to other illicit trades, and they're largely unenforced. Part of this is because a lot of these tech companies don't have specialists in the various areas of nefarious activity taking place on the platforms, and are not proactively looking for it. And that's something that authorities can do, and can kind of take advantage of the failures on the part of these platforms to use this as an opportunity for intelligence gathering on their end. This is something that can be done, and Amar and I have both shared information with relevant authorities where possible. But doing this at scale is incredibly important, because for the online trafficking world, there are no borders. So a seller in Turkey is easily communicating with an individual in Syria, in Jordan, in Iraq, all at the same time. And it really takes a broader look at this issue from several different layers of authorities to really be able to tackle it appropriately.
Yes, you're right. Dear Corrado, how can cooperation between international organizations help to reduce the online trade of illicit trafficked cultural property? What are the measures that could be adopted by different actors to achieve it?
Dear Ernesto, thank you for this second key question. Of course, the online trade is a global trade, and we need to act globally. And the only possibility is to improve the collaboration among all international and regional organizations. This is the only way. Where we have to act, to improve, to encourage more our member countries to act. First, let me tell you, for sure is to stress the importance to ratify all international conventions. As for the 1970, we are very close to globalize it, but we have still other, as the UNIDO Convention, that is on the basement of the Interpol Stolen Works of Art database, to give the possibility to all to the public to check before buying an object of art the illicit provenience. Well, this is for me the first step. Second step, of course, what we have to understand that is the organized crime and terrorism are using only a different place where to act, different place that has different rules, of course. What means, for example, when you are as a police officer, as a specialized police unit, you have to check the provenience of an object that is on the normal market. You can go in one auction house, you can go to the art dealer. If your national law allowed you to do it, you can check the provenience of the object and so on. In the online trade is a little bit more difficult, because not always the online auction house give the information about the owner, about the seller, and so on. Well, as international organization, we should, from my point of view, to stress the importance to issue national law that can give the possibility to the specialized police unit to check, to have this information shortly. We cannot wait months before having information about the seller, about where the object is hit. Well, for me, this is a very important point. And also to stress the importance with all our member countries to use the existing tools that are given by the international organization, starting from you, the national law database that is important for police as well for custom to understand immediately where an object, if they know where an object is coming from, which is, if this object is also protected by the national law. And without your database, it will be impossible. Well, to stress the importance to use it, to stress the importance to use the Interpol Stolen Works of Art database before buying something, especially online. You are already on the computer, you can check because it's free to use the Interpol Stolen Works of Art database to check before buying objects. This object is recorded in the Interpol Stolen Works of Art database. Of course, it will never give you the chance to know 100% the object has a licit or illicit provenance, but it's the minimum of the due diligence that should be done. To use, to stress the use of the ECOM red list is another important thing. It's mandatory for police, art collectors, general public, for customs to use this incredible tool. At the time is a short thing. Well, I cannot mention everything, but for sure we need to stress the importance to it. We need to stress the importance to set up a specialized police unit, to specialize customs in this field, to raise awareness among all stakeholders. This has to mandatory for us to stress that the cooperation as already is in place because this is the way forward where we should act, especially now that we are assisting that the online sale is increasing as a number. Thank you, Ernesto.
Grazie, Conrado. Lazare, une dernière question avant de passer aux questions to hear the question of delegation and audiences. So, Lazare, this year, the 70 convention is celebrating, as you know, 50 years. We are on it. How can the celebration of this anniversary being organized by UNESCO help to reduce the phenomenon of online sales that, as you know, is one of the biggest questions that has our member states? Lazare?
Okay, now it's good. Now, okay. No, I was saying regarding online sales, we know by now that improving regulations also at all countries is one side of curbing down the problems. But more than that, I think what Facebook has done already was also part of some of the discussion that we had also with them to involve them in the celebration. And I think to the fact that Facebook has decided finally to regulate the sales of cultural property on its website, it's really something which is encouraging and which is important. But you know, we have been discussing this with member states and state parties, is that another big of the part of the problem is the public that is not sufficiently sensitized about the subject, and that does not sometimes understand the potential problems linked to online sales of cultural property. So we need to better control also more, and to conduct more awareness on the side of who could be the potential buyers. And I think that's why you said it at the beginning, Ernesto, that UNESCO is going to start an awareness and raising campaign specifically on this point, and on how to get a better understanding also of the situation. So, for example, this online meeting, it's already a very good example on what UNESCO does to raise awareness on the dangers associated to online sales and illegal excavation. So, although this format is it's used to give floors to experts, but it's also ideal to speak to a large audience and to pass the message outside the usual perimeters of the organization. And I think there are also other issues. I think we are going to celebrate the first International Day on the fight against illicit trafficking, which is going to be also important on this celebration to again continue to pass this message. So it will be an opportunity to reach out also the large audience. And something that you said I like to say also, which is important, is that in the coming days, we are going to launch an international campaign that specifically targets, potential buyers and of cultural property. And with this campaign that UNESCO is going to launch, we specifically target buyers through, posters that showcase the stolen or lost object. And so this is important. Now, in improving regulations, this is also one of the problems that concerns all regions. So I think it's important, and I will conclude with it. It is important that we understand the priorities in each region. That's why we are going to have a series of online regional meetings to understand the priorities of each meeting, and even conduct regional studies and to bring them together so as we will be able to celebrate in an international conference which will happen online, which we are organizing in partnership with the Republic of Germany in November. So I think the aim of this is really to understand these issues, and these are already some of the actions that we are doing at UNESCO with Ernesto and the Director General Audrey Azoulay and the member states at all to start looking at this and celebrate this 50th anniversary, taking into consideration this emerging and unprecedented aspect. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Lazare. And now I'm taking some questions from the floor, the virtual floor. Christos, there is a question from Peru, especially. What are the best practices currently worldwide in the prevention of control of illegal excavations through the use of virtual technologies? Remote sensing, drone, satellite. Do you have some reflection about it?
There are more expert colleagues than me on these specific kinds of technological research that contributes to the wider problem. But everything is welcome, and many of these new techniques, new technologies have been incorporated the last few years. And there is a new growing field that is continually contributing on that as well. So everything is welcome. I would believe that they will be the ones that should address this question. However, it seems as a general, let's say, observation to say, it is honest to say that the looters and the illicit market is always at least one, maybe two or more steps ahead of us always, no matter how much we cooperate or not, which we have to fix that as well. And no matter how many advancements we are pushing through in order to catch up with them, because we are always chasing the problem. We are not getting at the same line, unfortunately. Up to a point, this is natural, as it happens with everyone who is trying to interpret a crime and to understand it and then to fight it. But from a point onwards, it's a necessity to make actual steps towards it. Technological issues that are being introduced all the time are always of help. However, we have seen that Google Maps, for example, and satellite imaging have been used also by looters. So there is a dual way of using this, and maybe as Lazare said, we should try to how to incorporate this, but to how to make this to update them in order to make better use for the law enforcement and for the researchers.
Very well. Corrado, I have a question from Aliyu Abdul Fattah. How can a UNESCO member state stop an ongoing action or auction if it suspects that some of the loots might be illicit traffic?
Ernesto, thank you for this question. This is a key question because how to do? First things is to report the problem to the police, because if you wanted to stop an action, if you wanted to withdraw an object, you need to have the proof that this object is coming from a crime, because otherwise police will never be able to stop the sale, to withdraw an object from online sale or from normal auction. Well, we need to know if there is this crime and to report it to the police. Different step, of course, is archaeological objects, is stolen objects coming from private collection. It depends what is the reasons, because the people are thinking that this object is coming from a crime, but it's coming from a crime has to be reported to the police. If the object was stolen or looted in another crime, the police has to report it to his National Central Bureau of Interpol, to send to raise the problem at international level, and to start with the collaboration among the different national police, because we know that when we are talking about an object of art, we are talking about money, and we need to give to the people that are acting all coverage of the different case.
Yes. Lazar, if you want, you can answer this. How to investigate and recover paintings stolen years ago before the ratification of the 70 Convention?
Yes, Ernesto, this is a very interesting question, because as some of our audience know, when a situation of theft happened before 1970, of course, the 1970 convention does not apply. And that is one of the reasons why the UNESCO has also, and member states have put in place the international intergovernmental committee on the promotion of return and restitutions, where member states have to start dialoguing on facilitating and understanding the best way to repatriate or to recover this stolen object, and sometimes even lost object. So I think this is where the two intergovernmental committee have to work together, and this is what we are trying to do. But definitely we also that's the reason why we are also bringing in our work our partners. Some of them are here, and very importantly even UNIDO, which is important. And so it's not a situation which is impossible to deal, but it's a situation which needs to be taking into account, some of this reality, but also promoting mediation and dialogue. Ernesto, we can't hear you.
I'm trying to find the last question that I have received. Yes, I found it. So, Katie, if you want to answer this, what kind of measures? It's coming from Peru and Libya, the delegations. What kind of measure should state parties to the 70 Convention take in order to prevent and control the illicit trafficking of cultural property during the current situation of COVID-19?
Well, in terms of controlling the illicit trade during COVID, I think that that's a matter of resource allocation based on what different authorities can implement. Some countries are dealing with more stringent lockdowns than others, which requires more enforcement from authorities and therefore more of their resources. One of the reasons that we've found Facebook can be helpful is because some of these live videos help you be able to target the types of illegal excavation taking place without sending people into the field first. Unfortunately, depending on the country and the COVID situation, these resources are going to vary widely. Ultimately, I think border control is going to be incredibly important. Those are authorities that may not be as tied up with enforcing domestic policies with regard to the COVID lockdown, and would be able to be more on alert for material coming in and out of the country. But I do think that this is something that nations are going to have to prepare for over time. This is certainly not going to be the last wave of this pandemic, nor likely the last pandemic that we see. And so we're going to have to see whether it's international organizations or local groups develop contingency plans for this type of crisis for when it happens in the future, because this is certainly not the last time it's going to happen, and technology is going to continue complicating the ability to control this trade.
I don't know if Lazar want also to.
No, I think we've already. I think the only thing I can say in addition to what Katie, I mean, she rightly answered from, is that really we understand here that specific law enforcement units working on art crimes, it's important. Having a specific personnel dedicated to monitoring online sales, it's also important, because we don't know if we are almost out of the situation of pandemic, and in some regions it's still continuing. So the more quicker these actions are put in place, it's better, especially, and they can be supported or assisted by UNESCO and all the partners. This is something that I could add at this stage, because the convention of the 1970, I mean, encourage and strongly encourage that all these specific and specialized units be put in place. And there is an opportunity now to make it happen, given the situation.
Very well. Corrado, Christos, you want to say a last word about this question?
No, personally, I don't have anything to add, unless there is an extra question from the audience. I would like to give any available time to the people who are looking this or watching this to have all possible opportunity to ask questions.
Very well. Corrado?
Thank you to give me the last possibility to say something. I agree with Lazar. It's very important that you set up the specialized police unit. Is one of our topic. Without a specialized police unit, but as well customs, we cannot think to really fight the illicit traffic of cultural property globally, not only online, but globally. It's absolutely not possible. All results can be achieved only otherwise by chance. No. In the correct way, how we should act. I would like also to remember to everybody, to all stakeholders of the art market, that we have to work together. This is the only way really to tackle this crime. And to the collectors, before buying, always checking the provenance of the items. This is mandatory for everybody, because it can be the support for organized crime to commit other crimes against the public security, and also for terrorism. This is the illicit traffic of cultural property is not a naive crime. It's a real, serious, transnational crime that needs to be fought by everybody. It's not the question only by police, custom, international organization. This is in charge of everybody. Before buying, to check. Thanks.
Very well. Thank you. Okay, we are receiving the last questions, and it goes to Corrado also. Is UNESCO working with the Directorate General of Antiquities and Museum in Syria to aid in developing safeguarding mechanisms for heritage during this time? Do you have this information, Corrado?
Honestly, no, I don't have this information. Well, I prefer not to answer, not to give fake information. I think I'm not the correct one to answer about it.
Very well. It was the last question that I received. Very well. Thank you so much again, dear panelists, for taking the time to share with all of us your experience and this fruitful discussion. I will only conclude this second panel. Well, we have all discussed that the pandemic has intensified the online sale of illicit cultural objects. You have been confirming us that the internet offers a valuable tool for traffickers to sell stolen cultural artifacts found on archaeological sites more easily and more rapidly, especially at a time when borders are closed and communication channels are restricted. You have also mentioned that 30% of the global amount of sites objects were online sales, and most of them were archaeological objects. In addition to illegal online sales issue, you have also underlined the use of internet by treasure hunters to share tips, as we saw, because you shared with us this video, represent another important problem that require attention from policymakers. While we cross this difficult time, there is a reason to double down our efforts in the fight against illicit trafficking, and this conference goes to show that appropriate measures and responses can help us in achieving this goal. Notably, states need to create specialized police units, as I said, that can monitor social networks and internet platforms, as they are very complex investigations. States also needs to work together with internet platforms to monitor auctions and online sales, because with online illegal sales, there are no borders. States and international organizations need to raise the awareness of the public to the dangers associated to online sales and illegal excavation. But the panelists have also shown that internet and new technologies can be used against traffickers. I'm talking about the database and software such as the online ones developed by Interpol that have been created to help find stolen artifacts and market. Very well. Before we close, I've been asked if it is possible for all the panelists to put your cameras on to show from the first and the second panel. If you are with us, that can help also to have this family picture, as we said in UNESCO. So, yes, Maria, hi. Okay, so once again, thank you so much. I hope that people that were following us had the same great time that I had hearing you and sharing all your experience and all your thoughts about an issue that for us as in UNESCO, for these 50 years of the 70 Convention, in these strange times, we will do as better as we can, because we have not only to advocacy for this, but we have to ensure that our member states will find in your organization, in your knowledge and in your experience, the help that they need. Because as you can imagine, illicit trafficking is empowering some criminal activities that cannot be compatible with the mandate of organizations like us, who are trying to get more in touch with societies and communities, and to ensure that finally what prevails is peace. So thank you so much. Thank you to all. Thank you for the audiences, and we hope to see you very soon for celebrating with us. I hope not only virtually. Thank you. Bye for all.